So today we're diving into the story of the Dead Kennedys, one of the smartest, most influential, and, most controversial punk bands America has ever produced. We're going to look at how they literally engineered a new sound for protest, the insane price they paid for it, and the complicated, messy legacy they left behind. And right out of the gate, this quote from the band tells you everything you need to know. This was never about just being loud and offensive for the sake of it. The name itself was a carefully crafted statement about the decay they saw in America. They were trying to make you think, not just shock you. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at how these guys built their totally unique sound. Then, how they turned every show into a political weapon. We'll get into their DIY anti-corporate revolution, the court case that tore them apart, and finally, their fractured and pretty bitter legacy. So, let's start with the music itself. First up, the sound. The Dead Kennedys didn't just fall into their style. No way. They were more like engineers, deliberately piecing together these really unconventional influences to create a sound that was built from the ground up for confrontation. I mean, just look at this mix. You've got Jello Biafra's wild, theatrical vibrato, which was totally unique, and Klaus Floride's bass lines that were way more complex and melodic, almost jazzy. But the real secret weapon? East Bay Ray's guitar. The guy was pulling from surf rock and old spaghetti western soundtracks. Think about that, reverb-soaked, spooky guitar lines in a punk band. Nobody was doing that. And this is what really set them apart. This was calculated. While a lot of punk guitarists were just cranking the distortion for a wall of noise, Ray was a total craftsman. He used a Roland Jazz Chorus amp because it's super clean, and a vintage Echoplex to get this incredible echo and atmosphere. It meant his guitar could be aggressive and sharp, but you could still hear every note. It was intelligent aggression. But, the music was really only half the battle. For these guys, every single performance, every public appearance was an act of political theater. It was designed to get in your face and provoke a reaction from the establishment. This story from their very first show at the legendary Mabuhay Gardens in San Francisco, well, it tells you everything. Their energy was so frantic, they burned through their entire set in 12 minutes. And Biafra wasn't just going to stand up on stage. He dove right into the crowd, immediately shattering that wall between the performer and the audience. And that confrontational spirit just exploded in 1979 when Jello Biafra ran for mayor of San Francisco. I mean, the platform was brilliant satire. Making businessmen wear clown suits, it sounds like a joke, but it's a pretty sharp comment on corporate America, right? And demanding that cops be elected by their neighborhoods, that's a serious point about accountability. It was performance art as a political campaign. And here's the kicker. It actually worked. This wasn't just some punk rock prank. He came in 4th out of 10 candidates. He got over 6,500 votes. He actually forced the political establishment, including the winner, Dianne Feinstein, to sit up and realize that the counterculture had a voice, and it was a loud one. So it's one thing to criticize the system, right? But the Dead Kennedys wanted to build an entirely new one. And in doing that, they basically sparked a revolution in do-it-yourself music. And their primary tool for this revolution was alternative tentacles. By starting their own record label, they had total creative control. They didn't have to answer to corporate suits. It meant they could release whatever they wanted, no matter how politically charged or provocative, stuff that no major label back then would have touched with a 10-foot pole. And man, did it work. The label launched with their legendary single, California Uber Alles, and their first album was this massive underground success. By 1981, they were putting out compilations that were connecting scenes all across the world. Alternative Tentacles wasn't just a label anymore. It was the hub of this global, independent political music network. What? And you knew there was a buck coming. All this independence and confrontational art came with a huge, huge price tag. This is where the band's message slammed head-on into the American legal system in a fight that, honestly, would end up destroying them. So the whole thing blew up over their 1985 album, Frankenchrist. And get this, it wasn't even about the music. It was about a poster they included inside the record sleeve, a surrealist art piece by H.R. Geiger, the guy who designed the creature from Alien. Well, a parent complained, and before they knew it, Jello Biafra and his label manager were facing criminal charges. The trial basically became this huge flashpoint in the culture wars of the 1980s. You had the prosecution arguing the poster was obscene, and the defense arguing this was a critical fight for free speech. Biafra was convinced that his tiny label was being used as a punching bag by powerful groups like the PMRC, that committee of Washington wives trying to censor rock music. And here's the truly tragic part. They technically won. The trial ended in a hung jury, so the charges were dropped. But it was a hollow victory. The legal fees absolutely bankrupted them. A ton of stores got scared and refused to carry their records anymore. All that pressure, all that financial ruin, it was just too much. The Dead Kennedys broke up in 1986. The cost of their art was their band. And that brings us to the final and, frankly, the most ironic chapter in their story. After they broke up, a band built on an anti-corporate message got tangled up in the very thing they always fought against: ugly legal battles over money and control. It all started with, of all things, a pair of jeans. There was a proposal to use their song Holiday in Cambodia in a Levi's commercial. Biafra, of course, refused. He saw it as the ultimate sellout. That fight led the other band members to audit Alternative Tentacles, and they claimed they were owed royalties, so they sued him. A jury found Biafra liable, and he was ordered to pay over $200 grand. And, crucially, the rights to the band's catalog were handed over to the other members. So then, in 2001, the rest of the band reformed and started touring, with a new singer. Biafra, now effectively kicked out of his own band, has been completely against it, famously calling it a karaoke act. And that deep, bitter divide between the original singer and the band exists to this very day. But look, despite all that ugliness, their influence is just undeniable. They helped invent American hardcore. Their speed and precision gave bands like Slayer a blueprint for thrash metal. Their legal fight was a landmark case against censorship. And that iconic DK logo, it's still a global symbol of rebellion. Which leaves us with this really tough question, right? The whole story of the Dead Kennedys is this perfect, messy example of what happens when art, money, and ideology all collide. It really makes you wonder, when your entire identity is built on fighting the system, what happens when you become a business? Who really gets to own that legacy?